Me this morning, Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator, and Gawain Towler, Westminster comms veteran. I really shouldn't laugh at that particular title, but I do every time, Gawain. Good morning to the two of you.
Good morning.
Right, shall we start with the situation with Russia and Putin? President Putin says that Russia has a stock of powerful new missiles. We've been talking about it all morning. His country, of course, fired a new ballistic missile at the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. He essentially said, look, these missiles fly very quickly. You can't intercept them. The rhetoric is being ramped up here. You've got Biden obviously authorising the ATACMS missiles. You've got the Storm Shadows being used. You've got this window of opportunity until Trump comes in. He says he's going to end this war immediately. And there is also another story from the Russian ambassador saying that Britain is now directly involved in the Ukraine war. Andriy Kelin warned the West to carefully consider the lower bar that Russia has established for using nuclear weapons. Of course, we know that Putin has actually changed the law to allow the threshold to be dropped so that he can use nuclear weapons. These are very concerning statements.
I mean, not according to the Foreign Secretary. He said that he wasn't concerned about changes in Russian nuclear doctrine. I'm not sure what planet he's living on. Personally, the words Putin changes nuclear doctrine are going to cause anyone a great deal of concern in that. But we're entering, hopefully, the end game of the Ukraine war. If Donald Trump can do what he says he can do, which, you know, we haven't had any details of that, and bring the war to an end within 24 hours, we're talking about a conflict that's been going on at this point for almost 2.5–3 years. And what is the scenario here? Do you want to see what's happened in Syria with a protracted civil war going on to that? There has to be some sort of compromise at this point.
And so, Gawain, also the involvement of North Korea here, also being amassed into Russian troops as well, I think is extremely worrying. Donald Trump may well say to Ukraine, you have to cede territory. Invariably, he will say that as well. Is that a price, do you think, that we should pay? Because I'm not sure how big the appetite from the British public is to continue this.
It's not just the British public, is it? It's the European public as well. I think if the West had wanted to back Ukraine, it should have done from day one. As it happened, because most of continental Europe had all its gas coming out of Russia, it couldn't. If they'd the idea that a country that is invaded and attacked cannot defend itself by striking back at the country that has attacked it is ridiculous. Yet, it's only just happened. So in Russian eyes, this is an escalation. If it had happened on day two, it would have been a perfectly reasonable response. But to Russian eyes, this is an escalation. And I can't see, to the Russians, they will see it as such. We let this happen. We are treating the disaster of Ukraine like a medieval doctor did with leeches. It might stop the blood flow, but it ain't going to cure the patient.
So therefore, you have to ask, is this because there was weak leadership from Biden who refused to take those decisions?
Not just Biden.
But it is underpinned by the United States.
It is, but the tub thumping was mostly from Germany, Poland and places like that who understandably have got a ruddy great bear parked on their border, but also are using the bear for all their power. And they would have civil unrest in Europe if they had blocked that power, or Russia had blocked that power going to them. As Trump famously said during the Trump 45, when he went to Germany, he said, don't talk about me, you're the ones with all the power. And the Germans laughed at him. A few years later, Russia invades Ukraine and Germany is compromised like nobody's business.
But there's the problem. If you cede Ukrainian territory to Putin, he will be emboldened. And, of course, we were hearing from Anthony Glee saying he's a bully and he will continue to march into Europe. And I think Anthony is absolutely right. This is the time to show leadership. Keir Starmer can't even tell us how much defence budget we're going to spend.
I mean, this goes back all the way to Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008, 2009, the seizing of territory in 2014.
So we should have acted earlier.
Well, European powers, successive governments, Western governments have been allowing Russia to creep and take territory from Ukraine for 15 years now. And it's a bit late to be complaining. I mean, Joe Biden's decision to allow the use of the missiles is the last desperate act of an American who inherited, I would argue, Trump's increasingly isolationist view of foreign policy that began under Obama and the pivot to Asia as well. Increasing American presidents have shown that they are not interested in Europe, and this is where I think we have to acknowledge that collective security, for the good of Britain and the other European countries, we have to be looking to our European partners, looking to our own defence spending, looking to pay for our own defence in that regard. NATO cannot survive. I mean, going to there about the right of self-defence to be invoked for later members, that has to be underpinned by us paying for our own defence.
But that's really interesting because, of course, let's move on to this other story about the ICC issuing the arrest warrants to Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant. Now, you've got Joseph Borrell, our old friend over there saying that the whole of Europe needs to be united and uphold this. You've got Keir Starmer, who won't actually tell us whether he will actually uphold that, and whether if Netanyahu gets off a plane at Heathrow, whether he'd be arrested. The US apoplectic at this.
I'm with the US on this. I think that European unity doesn't actually exist. It exists in it exists in communiques after conferences. It exists after summits. It exists maybe in the Berlaymont building in Brussels, but beyond that, it doesn't exist at all. You cannot tell me that the Geert Wilders of this world are on the same page as the leaders of Spain or Portugal or Greece. This is fantasy politics. So Josep Borrell making a statement like that can, I would say, fold it up, put it in an envelope and send to Santa.
I mean, it's fascinating. Obviously, I have some experience of being in Europe and working with my colleagues in the European Parliament. That's true, what Gawain says, actually. It's not a homogenous group.
No, of course not. I mean, I forget which US president famously said, oh, if I want to call Europe, who do I call? Yeah. There is now a foreign policy chief, but you think about the language in the communiques. International summits and cooperation are becoming increasingly difficult today.
Look at Baku.
Look at Baku. Look at what's happening at COP29 as well, the vague language there around. Increasingly what we're seeing are the importance of bilateral relationships building up as well. And I think, you know, it's not for anything that it's 100, you know, or roughly 100 years since the Entente Cordiale came in, 120 years since that is, and us building better bilateral connections with our European allies. I mean, I think if there was one good thing that came out of the Ukrainian situation, it was the fact that countries like Germany, Olaf Scholz, recognised the need to switch from their traditional post-war doctrine of not really, of having quite a pacifist you know, constitution, not really deploying German troops overseas. Japan's got a similar one that's inhibited. The international order has shifted since 1945, and we need to be looking at a more
Germany also will not agree with the ICC either. I just wonder how much of that from Borrell is a land grab to say that actually we do need to have European unity.
If you look at the history of international courts, it started in the mid-19th century, where the US was the great defender of the international court system, the concept of the international court. They pushed it. Britain, at the time, was top nation. We said, absolutely no way. There's no way these minnows are throwing chains around us. Now, the US is in that situation, and there's no way. Do you think China would support an ICC decision when it sees the ICC's possibility of throwing chains? So when the top couple of nations in the world have no interest in international justice, sent out by minnows, of course they're not going to take it seriously.
And what British government is going to arrest the Israeli Prime Minister if he steps off a plane? I mean, can you imagine the diplomatic...
Who did we arrest? We arrested the Chilean, Pinochet. Pinochet was the only person I can remember being arrested.
But let's go back to that point. Why doesn't Keir Starmer say that's absolutely ridiculous? Why doesn't he actually take a position? Because he is Prime Minister. I don't know if he's noticed, but he is Prime Minister.
He is Prime Minister, yes.
Muslim Street in Britain.
He has...
Muslim Street in Britain. The dangers to the Labour vote, as was seen by the independents who won seats across the north and places like this, as you see from the collapse in Labour support in parts of the East End, Muslim Street in London, that vote bank that Labour has always relied on, and it has been growing over the years, is something that he is extremely concerned about losing.
And that's something that is exactly what one of our callers said. So you're saying that essentially Starmer has to have a very carefully balanced journey here because he doesn't want to alienate.
He's between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
And he's also, by instinct, someone who believes in the international justice order because he's a human rights lawyer.
He's a legal bureaucrat.
He's a legal, so he is essentially, it's the same reason that they're still pushing for free trade deals in the world that's becoming increasingly protectionist. Our values are often out of line with what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Okay. Our values are our values, and they're far better than theirs.
Absolutely.
Let's pause because I want after the break to move on to Rachel Reeves. This row is ongoing. There's some marvellous memes which I've been very entertained by. Rachel Reeves in various jobs. Hopefully I can show you some of those after this break. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Now, Rachel Reeves, the gift that keeps on giving, this one, is in the Daily Mail today. Chancellor Rachel Reeves reportedly misrepresented her job title from her time at retail banking firm Halifax. We know this. Her LinkedIn profile said she was an economist for the Bank of Scotland between 2006 and 2009. Then the profile was updated to say that she'd been involved in retail banking. She is now blaming this on one of her staff. It was nothing to do with me. And essentially, she allegedly wasn't an economist. She was head of planning and customer relations, head of customers' mortgage.
Wow, I mean, so we've a chancellor there with experience of personal finance and mortgages there. That sounds
you're
right
defending her.
I will.
You're defending her.
I don't know. She's a chancellor. She has an experience of personal finance and things like this. So she's got experience of ignoring people and problems. It's a bank complaints department. For goodness' sake, you never get any joy.
Transferable skills, Gwen. Transferable skills.
Yes, the telephones. That's what she did there.
I think she was probably 2 or 3 grades.
I am being harsh.
I mean, we both used to work in customer services here, so we appreciate winning the public.
Though I don't know. She went to the Bank of England straight from her masters, didn't she?
Well, in fact, she was there, I think, when she was still doing it.
And then she stayed on at the Bank of England as a very junior analyst.
She says she described herself as a very junior Japan analyst.
Correct. Now,
in 2012.
If she then chose to go to Halifax to be customer relations.
Yeah.
OK, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if you were a Bank of England economist, why would you do that?
That's the point.
Seriously,
no, that's the point.
Well, something I'd like to point out. Look, I have some sympathy for
embellishment of CVs?
No, for the Chancellor.
Oh.
Because, well, yes, to a certain extent, in the sense that I recall when I was working with UKIP, Paul Nuttall was the leader, and he was trashed because a member of his staff said doctor, PhD, rather than doing his PhD.
Right.
And from that moment on, Nuttall was toast. Dr. Nuttall of the UKIP. I played in the FA Cup final. The same memes we're seeing for Rachel Reeves were done.
So I'm amazed.
And Labour were behind these attacks on Paul. And though I have sympathy for her position, I quite believe that it was a member of staff that did it, not her. I can quite believe
she
that.
doesn't update her LinkedIn page, to be
precisely.
honest.
So I do have sympathy. What I don't have sympathy is the cant and the hypocrisy and the way that Labour trashed anybody else. And now, oh no, for us it's different. So that's where I have a problem.
Okay, so I've enjoyed enormously all the memes that people are putting on social media, and I want to show you some of them, but I'm not being allowed to because there may be copyright issues over.
Is Elon tweeting them by any chance? Because he loves a meme.
I mean, people said she was the first woman to walk on the moon.
Yeah, she got married to the Duke of Edinburgh at some point.
She got married. There's also a banknote with her picture on it.
Oh, that's the £100 note we're getting.
Oh, they are really brilliant, but I do not understand how she is still in that job. And Gawain's point is really valid, actually. If it had been the other way round, and if it had been a Conservative, I don't think that person would still be in power.
Well, here's the thing. We know, we've had context for this a few years ago when the Chancellor has seen their credibility shredded and the Prime Minister loses faith in them. 2 years ago, Kwasi Kwarteng, Liz Truss, she was out 9 days later.
Exactly.
Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves made this sort of Faustian pact in opposition, when he put her in there, and Labour has, as Gawain's entirely right, traded on this Bank of England economist reputation for competence on her CV. This is how they style themselves.
Well, I don't think you can look at competence anymore, having looked at the budget.
Well, I was about to say, let's move us on, shall we? Because if you are waking up this morning in the Daily Mail front page, private sector shrinks after Labour budget. The Times says UK economy takes a hit after Labour tax increases. I've been talking about this all morning. The fact is, and I'm glad you mentioned Truss's budget, but here we are, Rachel Reeves. It's either incredibly ill thought through or it's disingenuous, because you say you're not going to increase tax for the working person. You've got all these businesses saying we can't afford to employ anyone, we're going to lay people off. The employers' national insurance contributions.
They are putting together, and they're putting out in year one, most of the things they think are going to cause upset. So in 3 years' time, they can go, oh look, we're Lady Luck, and here's some largesse.
I don't think it will survive. I think if we look at what's happening macroeconomically, well, first of all, if you read the OBR's analysis of the budget, it will increase growth, but only if they maintain the degree of stimulus spending that they are doing as well.
Where are they going to get the money for that?
Well, that's the point.
the shrinking private sector.
And if we see inflation continue to grow, the private sector continue to shrink, they're going to have to come back and either increase taxes or cut spending.
So just for people who are just waking up, Labour last night was accused of wrecking UK growth. Businesses gave the thumbs down to the budget. The economic figures show the private sector is shrinking, and there are now fears of recession. Now, that is not exactly a sort of a glowing endorsement of the budget. And the national insurance contributions, and I keep coming back to that, it is wrong to say that working people won't be impacted because, of course, the employers will not be able to afford to employ people, so they'll be laid off, and therefore people won't be working.
And you add all the workers' rights to being added to the box. Why would an entrepreneur employ somebody under the current conditions? Day one. Those rights come in on day one, don't they?
They do.
So we're going to see a loosening of the labour market. So figures are going to go up.
It is going to be, employment will go up, inflation will go up, the private sector shrinks. Without the private sector, there is no money to pay for your whacking great pay rises for nurses. Then, of course, if you don't want your farm to be cut in half,
yes,
you hate nurses, huh?
Yes.
Where did that come from?
Well, and also...
You know any government is out of ideas, out of thought, as soon as they say, if you don't do what we say, nurses!
Yes, that's right.
And this is where the Parliamentary Labour Party's unity starts to really come under strain, because there are now Labour MPs in areas where Labour MPs, not since Blair, lots of Labour MPs now in rural areas, like Suffolk Coast, Jennifer Riddle-Carpenter, to name one.
There's a Green in Herefordshire.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Labour is no longer just the party of the kind of inner-city urban areas.
More farmers.
Not yet, but they're still relatively loyal.
Runcorn, I just got... Well, somebody got in touch with me last night whose family are dairy farmers in Runcorn, where that probable by-election will take place. Dairy farmers. What we're seeing, and you are absolutely right, so today, Labour now represent more people, countryside people, than the Tories do.
Yeah.
And they've not noticed that.
Let me just bring... I mean, there's a brilliant quote from Rachel Reeves this morning.
It's the MP for Croydon.
So Rachel Reeves says, I am... Will you behave?
Steve Reeves, the MP for Croydon.
No, I know. Well, that's a very good point, actually, about the number of people in Defra who've actually got urban constituencies.
And Defra's revenue budget has been cut this year as well.
Exactly. And I just want to make the point, actually, that on farmers, 30% of farms made a loss in 2023 and 24. 25% made profits under 25,000. Now, apparently, someone's just messaged me to say the reason these figures, and there's a discrepancy between what the NFU are saying and what the government is saying, is because the government has confused acres and hectares.
Yes,
I wouldn't be at all surprised.
I think of the confusion. When I was working in the European Parliament, during the foot and mouth disaster, I remember getting a phone call from a farmer in distress, tears. And I said, well, what's the problem? I've just had these messages from Defra. I don't know how to deal with these people. Right. I said, well, send them across. So he sent this thing. Now, his farm was in the penumbra of foot and mouth, where you still had to get permissions to move cattle from A to B and all the rest of it. And he'd said he wanted to move his heifers from field A to field B. And the Defra civil servant, who was controlling his life, remember, said, are they male or female heifers?
Oh, my goodness.
And so when the person, the 25-year-old who's controlling your life, is that ignorant...
I know.
And one feels the whole of Defra is staffed by people who've never seen a barber.
So I'm just going back to Defra. Well, going back to Defra, their constituencies are Streatham, Cambridge, Coventry and Hull. Cambridge I'll sort of allow you to be semi-rural. It's not really.
Coventry is not rural.
Coventry definitely isn't. Streatham, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a farm. And Hull...
Well, I suppose the Vauxhall City Farm, but that's Vauxhall, not Streatham.
Well, you've also got City Farm in the East End of London as well. But Rachel Reeves, though, says, I am not content with the state of the economy. Well, you caused it.
Well, no, to be fair, this shrinking of the... I don't... Have those tax increases actually come in?
No.
Or is it a shrinkage of planning?
No, but...
Is it a shrinkage of planning? You can't...
It's a business confidence decision.
Exactly.
I agree. It's business confidence.
It hasn't happened yet.
I think the Labour Party still has about a year, though it's using it up damn fast, but it's got about a year where it can point to the fingers and say, look at the Tories. And so...
Yeah, after 12 months,
yes, these headlines, I think, are legit, with business confidence and think, I'm not going to invest, I'm not going to employ. I do think that there's still a little bit of, come on, the Tories made this.
OK, fine. But let's move on and talk about things like pubs, for example. The industry has now warned this is a deep and painful wound for pub trade. The British... I know you like a pub. British Beer and Pub Association. They say that the pubs will shut. We're already fighting to keep rural pubs open as it is, but they can't afford to keep them open. Then you've got an employer's national insurance. Then you've got all of the electricity costs. We've seen the energy price cap going up. Meanwhile, Ed Miliband doesn't seem to understand that people can't afford electricity bills. Massive disconnect between the government and the populace.
I mean, the energy price cap itself is a ridiculous policy that really should be gotten rid of. I mean, look, what struck me as the complete failure of our energy market was when 2 years ago when Truss was proposing price controls. You know, one of the most sort of free market conservative leaders that they've had since Thatcher proposing price controls. It's bonkers. But dealing with the here and now, the issue has become that we need to... Look, Rishi Sunak recognised this, but they need to improve energy security. I think Gawain hit up on it earlier. There's a reason that, there is no reason why we cannot be more self-sufficient when it comes to generating our own electricity and make that cost cheaper as well.
Policy.
Drill, baby, drill.
Well, that's the point.
There is... If we are chasing net zero policies that will impoverish us, but will not change a bit because we just export jobs, export pollution to another country. But we're nice. This is absurd.
But everyone else can freeze, including the pensioners.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, we've got assisted dying. Is this the government's add to it? It is something that we have to change and across the continent, people are beginning to wake up. The head of RWE yesterday basically said, "Eek, Germany's going to run out of fuel," particularly they're terrified of what happens.
Since they got rid of all their nuclear power stations in 2011 as well.
Madness.
But we've also got an energy
a lot of that blame on the Lib Dems.
Well, yes, but also I don't understand why you're pursuing the net zero madness when people are struggling to pay their bills. Surely we need to invest in energy in this country. And as Gawain says, drill, baby, drill, and also nuclear is the answer.
It's fascinating because you're seeing now, I think, where the effective lobbying has been when Labour's been in opposition, and things like, to go back to the pubs, Hospitality UK, incredibly effective trade body, NFU, very high profile, small tax change but making it effectively. The reason businesses got hit as hard as they did is because there was a real gap in the business lobby because the CBI basically folded.
It's captured.
Yeah. And
so is the FSB, sadly.
And they'll be sounding off at their conference on Monday going, "Oh, we didn't want to do this." But if they'd been as effective as they had been in the past, then businesses wouldn't have been hit with this.
Going back to pubs, I think there's a very interesting thing that happened recently, and that's when Labour basically said the smoking ban outside.
Yes.
It pulled back. When did it pull back? It didn't pull back because the hospitality trade bodies said so.
No.
Because they knew what the hospitality trade bodies were saying before they made the announcement. They pulled back when Farage was in America for 3 days, so he couldn't claim victory. No, seriously. Without Farage, that would still be going through. But because he has this ability to cut through, they basically... so he wasn't able to claim victory.
And obviously you would say that. Gentlemen,
yes,
our time is up, I'm afraid. Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator, Gawain Towler, Westminster Comms veteran. That was today's Head to Head.